Hi, my name is Dominique Mack, and I'm so excited to be here with you today at the second annual Autism in Black Conference discussing culturally responsive parenting and advocacy. If you're viewing this session, that means that you're a parent of a child with unique learning needs, or you work closely with this unique population and you're committed to ensuring equity in the public school setting for all children. Our time together will be brief but impactful as we discuss how we can establish equity and inclusion in education with a systematic approach to leveling the playing field in special education. I want to thank Mrs. Maria Davis-Pierre for this amazing opportunity, and I truly hope that at the end of this presentation, you feel empowered to know that you are more than capable of making drastic positive change for all children in the public education setting. A little bit about me. I have a very untraditional journey into education. Although my mother always said I would be a preacher when I was younger, education was not my first choice career. In fact, my son Clifford is a lot of the reason why my life has transpired the way that it has so far. He is my why. I became a teacher to provide for him, and I started my organization, Parenting in Bliss, to be the support that I didn't always have while raising him. At the age of 5, my son had already attended 4 different schools. A very similar story of most children with unique learning needs. The lack of equity towards understanding my Black child was abhorrent. He was labeled a discipline issue by the age of 3. I remember seeking to get him tested around this age. 2 white female recent graduates from a private university in Texas had come and observed my son. He displayed the same challenging behaviors that we were experiencing in schools. And when I asked what I should do as a parent, or if there was a root cause that I wasn't able to properly identify, I was told that the behavior should be ignored. He was just acting out. 2 years later, we would get an official diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, and then be put out of that school because they didn't provide those services. Whether it was because of the diagnosis, him being male, and or Black, it was and continues to be an uphill battle to ensure that my son receives the supports he needs in education to reach his fullest potential. But all is not lost. Through this journey, our journey, I have confidently found my voice, and I am daily breaking barriers for children like my son to ensure that every child, no matter the learning difference, receives an equitable education that supports their needs. In this session today, I aim to ensure that attendees will be able to successfully apply key levers during IEP meetings to ensure sustained success for Black children in the public education setting. In order to reach this goal, we have 3 indicators for success. I can maintain peace of mind, I can effectively communicate goals and expectations, and I can hold myself and others accountable. So why is this work necessary? There's so much data out there, and truly it is all overwhelming because there is data to support 2 sides of the same coin. There are researchers and other educational stakeholders that believe that there is a vast disparity and over-identification of Black children in the public education setting. On the other hand, there are also a group of researchers that believe that there is an under-identification of services and special education qualification for children of color. Both agree that Black children and children from low-income families are at a deficit and continue to see academic success at a much lower rate than their peers. The bottom line is that we must be dedicated to the idea that it is our responsibility to design a system that helps all children and families to thrive by any means necessary. The reality is, when our children, your children, are not seeing success in school, or they're being labeled a behavior problem, we as adults are not being equipped with the tools to help attack the root cause. All across the country, parents are being told of the deficits their child possesses, but few and far between are conversations being had about how to break barriers in education so that the child can reach their full potential. This is where the inequity lies. I am here to provide the empowerment so the next time you're invited to the IEP table, your voice will resonate your voice will resonate as the most credible voice at the IEP table. Before we jump into our content, we're going to hear from two amazing moms that have done and are doing this work in real time. Let's listen as they share their experience as part of the Black autism community. Murphy of the Unnesting Mom. Hi, Demaria. How are you doing?
I am well.
Thank you so much for being here. So tell us a little bit about who you are and your journey as a parent of a child with unique learning needs.
Well, I am an educator by trade, so I have over a decade of experience between the classroom and teaching collegiately. And I have transitioned out of the classroom and I have a life coaching business. So I'm known as the Unnesting Mom because the majority of my clients are mothers, and I help them to end that burnout before bedtime exhaustion and help them to focus on their goals.
I absolutely love that. From one mom to another, that is definitely something that I need. And it is so wonderful when we can connect with parents who know that there is a need for that out there, because sometimes I feel like on this journey, we can feel like we're alone. And so it is so important to connect with people that remind us, you're not the only one. And there is support and advocacy and mentorship out there and available. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive right in. How old was your child when you first were invited to the IEP table?
Uniquely enough, it was ending second grade. I was not invited. I had made mention for several years. I went ahead and which is another privilege, we were able to use our healthcare insurance and private funding to do our own screenings. And so I invited myself when he was entering third grade.
Absolutely. That is a very good point that you made, because sometimes it is the parent who has to speak up first. So kudos to you for being your own advocate. And your son is 11 now, correct?
He is.
So this journey has been 5 going on almost 6 years now.
Yes.
So tell me about, how did you initially feel about IEP meetings, especially given your background already as an educator?
I think on the educator side, to be honest, because I was always and still am so passionate about teaching and education that I only mainly encountered my team who was also just as passionate. So there wasn't, to be honest, like a slacker among us. So I had positive thoughts about the IEP table because there was no large pushback. People on the team mainly wanted the best for the student. So that was my experience.
And so you were hopeful that as a parent now at the IEP table, that was going to be your same experience.
Yes.
Is that how things happened?
Yes and no. In the sense that they knew, I felt like the teacher wanted to see my son, and by see, it's like air quotes, to like actually see him. I believe that her intentions were well. The social worker, since he kept not being eligible, just kind of teetering along whether or not he qualified, he had already had some social services, so I was familiar with her. So it was nice to see a familiar face who I knew was like a good advocate and someone who was invested. All of those things were positive. I would say that the one issue that kept coming up was that we were teetering around the idea or the concept that this is a Black boy, a young Black boy. So I don't think they even thought about how they would write the IEP. And for me, I knew that I wanted it to be under social emotional, because that was what was important, and it wasn't like a behavioral issue. And then that's when I got like the colorblind comments. And my husband and I, we were very direct about that. Like, no, you need to see him. And I will say that the principal advocated, she understood that with that, they're typically with Black boys in particular, or well, I'm reading articles about kindergarten now with just Black kids in general, but higher suspensions and different things of that nature. So we at least knew that she understood some of it, but it was just kind of tiptoeing around something that was important to us.
That is so true. We often see that in our, especially our Black boys, because we have a whole separate issue with our Black girls being under-identified, but with our Black boys, they do tend to heavily lean on behavior and suspension and either emotional disturbance or oppositional defiance. And this conversation of autism is still nuanced for us. So it makes it very difficult for us to come to the table as advocates. Thank you so much for sharing that. So how, if any way, did his school prepare you or provide any type of pre-meeting or pre-coaching per se prior to the IEP meeting?
I want to say they did provide something. So I know the school psychologist called to explain herself, how they would do their evaluations. They sent home an evaluation form so that they could, have something to measure the behavior or whatever was observed in class when the psychologist and social worker and other staff members would come observe him. So they did provide that. That's probably the only thing that I can think of as far as providing anything. As far as support, they did explain the IEP process. So that was explained to me. There was no explanation about advocacy or if I would be bringing someone or different things of that nature. And it may be because I didn't know this teacher was the beginning of the year, but they may have known that I was an educator per the principal. So maybe some of those things were assumed.
So my follow-up question, do you feel that the conversations that you had before your meeting, if you did not have that background in education, do you feel that just thinking from another lens as a parent who may not be an educator, would that have been difficult for them to understand? Or did they make it easier for you to understand the process and what was going to happen moving forward?
I felt like it made it easier for the process because I could differentiate and compartmentalize behaviors at home versus behaviors at school. Because, like, probably a lot of parents will say some of these behaviors don't happen at home as they do at school. So I would say that because of that background and the small preparation that they gave me, I could compartmentalize, and I mainly focused on school behaviors, which was a lot of social things like not understanding proximity or what is socially appropriate to say, those type of things, which weren't happening at home because he knew us the best. So
correct. Good. It gets me excited because when a parent can come to the table with more knowledge, then we are able to see more success in our students. So I'm hearing that in what you're sharing with us today. So knowing what you know now, do you feel the school in any way could have better prepared you? So I heard you talk a little bit about there wasn't a lot of conversation around you with an advocate. Do you feel that had the school came to you and said, hey, feel free to get an advocate, that maybe would have changed your perception about things?
I do, because I came with a diagnosis. I know sometimes at the beginning of an IEP process, there isn't even a necessarily a clear diagnosis or a clear path to help the student at school. So I do feel like because they knew that he was on the spectrum, that something could have been provided to me for that. No one asked me well, it was dated, but no one asked me like if this was like his initial diagnosis or those type of follow-up questions, because he has Asperger's and he's on the higher like learning side. Just those type of like things were did not seem to they weren't brought to me at all. So I think if they had an advocate in that way, that would have been helpful,
Yeah, I
because a
agree.
lot of it I relied on what I experienced with him, but as a family, and the information from the psychologist. So, in my experience in the classroom with other students who were on the spectrum.
And one thing that I notice about some school districts is that they will provide that type of advocacy and information, but it's during the school day, which makes it so difficult because we're working parents. So then we don't get to take advantage of those resources. So it's almost like, who are you really trying to serve in this regard? Because I work a 9 to 5, you know? So,
Well, that comes with another privilege. As we have four, and so as we have more children, daycare just was not making sense. So I do have the privilege of working from home and at that time being a stay-at-home mom. But I'm hoping that the pandemic was obviously tragic, but this technology age with Zoom and other things, there should be more resources that expand outside of the workday, because it is very hard, especially scheduling those meetings, or even I think that might help alleviate some of the pressure to. I wonder how many parents sign because they don't want to continue the process and prolong it, or they're concerned about how this will impact their child in receiving services.
absolutely. And we really have to push just, and I know that this is the work that you and I are both in, but pushing for these educational institutions to provide more opportunities for parents to understand. I know in my experience, there's no pre-conversation. You get the call from the diagnostician to say, we finished testing and when are you available to meet? And then you're overwhelmed in this meeting for 2-3 hours trying to get all this information, and it's very difficult. And I believe that we are on that privileged end because we're both educators, so we kind of knew what to expect and knew how things go. I knew how things are supposed to go, but there are so many parents out there that are just not, um I guess, as lucky, I guess, to be one, for lack of better words, as we have been.
Well, now that you bring it up, I'm so used to seeing these Illinois IEP papers. I'm very familiar with them.
Yeah.
So yeah, just reading like the the categories, what waiving your rights mean, what even your rights are. It seems like a blur now. I know they explained some of the rights, but I felt like everything came from the educational lens, that it was
Mhm.
just like a protocol, almost like an assembly line. Now that we're having this conversation, in my recollection, I don't feel like it was, well, this is about this one student. Like, well, here's the IEP, this is this, you have the right for this. It was just like that type of thing, like almost like a checklist.
Like a checklist, yes. And we are going to talk about that in the session today, about how they copy and paste some of the things, because we know, because it becomes
Hmm.
so mundane. But when it's your child, you want for things to be done a certain way. And a lot of parents who, like I said, they don't have that academic background or that educational background to know what it should look like. You don't even know what to say. So thank you so much for sharing that. So did you ever in this process need an advocate? Why or why not?
Um, I think, well, I would say yes. I would say during the process, including throughout the school year. Are we talking about that or just mainly at the IEP table?
Both, because we know sometimes you can create the IEP and then what you talk about isn't being done. So yes, both.
So yes, I do think it would have helped, because I feel like emotions are high, and as you mentioned, if things are not being followed that are within the IEP, um, like for instance, if my child needs more time in the classroom, then why do I have to ask you to add that to standardized tests? Or within the class, if my child has failure to start because he's literal, um, then why is it okay that he does nothing? Where's the entry point that will help him to begin? Because when we go home, I do that entry point. And why do I have to modify homework? Because now we have 30 problems, like we're not doing all of this. Um, which is only going to add to his frustration. So then I would modify the homework. So basically, I'm also being a teacher as well. So
Mhm.
what problems show that you understand the concept? And I think evaluation. So a lot of looking at like grade reports and what are you measuring when you measure this? And then having to go back, like, is this a measurement of him individually, or are you comparing this to where he should be in the general public population?
Ooh, I got chills. You said a lot of good stuff right there. And it is so good. I hope that the parents out there are taking notes because you're speaking to that accountability piece and just knowing what does it look like when you leave the table because the work is not done. In fact, I feel like that's when the work starts because
Mhm.
you have to make sure that the things that you are asking for are being done because the success of your child depends on it at the end of the day. And
And my
some,
child did
uh-huh.
not, I'm sorry.
No,
No, I
please
was going
go
to say
ahead.
the last thing back to the advocacy. My child didn't need any additional services or like devices, but being on the teacher side, I know how sometimes a school, especially if it lacks resources, wants to be a little more hush about certain things because then that means that it's paid sometimes out of pocket from the district. I've had students who have needed recording devices and speech devices, and those things were like five figures. So,
Yeah, they're not as forthcoming. And especially for our Black and Brown children, where parents are, I mean, they are at the school's graces because they're looking at you to be the most knowledgeable. Versus on this end with you, you had some knowledge to the table, but majority of our parents, they don't have that. And so they're coming to the table, please help me, and we're not, the education system is not being forthcoming with those things. So absolutely, thank you for sharing that. My last question is, what is one thing that you feel all parents need to know before attending their first IEP meeting?
oh, good question. I would say the first thing is to pat yourself on the back, because, and give yourself a big hug, because I
Yeah.
do think that sometimes you know that you're not crazy and there's some relief when you get to that point. But you've done the best that you can do, up to that point. And I would say making sure that you know that you have the opportunity to not only read the documents, to ask questions, to take them home with you. So take your time with the information.
Yes.
And I would say just keep knocking on doors. Relationships go a long way. So hopefully you'll encounter educators and social workers and staff who generally want the best opportunity for your child. Um, but if you don't have that, then keep knocking on doors all the way up to, district office, superintendent, or wherever you have to go. And I do believe that someone will create the proper path, especially if you are going to maintain being an advocate.
Yes, because you are your child's first advocate. Woo! Thank you so much. That was some good stuff. Good stuff. And where can the people find you if they want to follow no more? If I'm out there and I'm like, man, I just need a friend, and oh, that smile is just being so warming to me. How can we reach you?
They can find me mainly on Instagram. I do have a website that is unnestymom.com, UNNESTING, unnestymom.com. Instagram handle is the same. So I do a lot of mommy advice, parenting, advocacy. But the main thing is just making a woman be whole again because our roles and titles were pulled in so many directions. So would love to help as many women as I can.
Thank you so much, Ms. Murphy, for being here with me today and sharing your experience at the IEP table. Stay tuned for our next parent. Thank you. Here from Crystal Jordan of the Bedroom Talk Show on YouTube. Unlike our previous mom, she did not have a background in education, but she has worked extremely hard educating herself and creating her own resources to be the advocate that her child needs. Crystal, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you for having me. I want to just say I became an advocate because of my son. My son was diagnosed when he was 2 years old, and I just hit the ground running, and I just decided to just educate myself. And I started to write books, and I'm happy you said the Bedroom Talk Show because every April I go over and beyond to interview moms, educators, anybody who wants to talk about autism, who is making a difference within that community. Because being Black and talking about special needs, that's a whole different subject.
It's taboo, right?
It is taboo, right? Because a lot of people was raised, what stays in this house, stays in this house. Don't tell nobody what's going on in this house. Mm-hmm. And for this generation, our generation, and the next generation, being able and open, talking about special needs and autism is amazing.
Yes, yes. And I really want to give kudos to the work that Crystal is doing. We connected through her talk show that is on YouTube, talking about IEPs and advocating for children with unique learning needs. And so Crystal, go ahead, just take a moment, tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the things you've done for the autism community.
So like she said, I do an interview every year in April, but besides that, I have children's books that I write about autism awareness. Because my son is nonverbal, I didn't see a lot of books on the market with a Black boy who was nonverbal. And I needed him to know that he was important and he was enough. And I wanted other Black kids to be able to find themselves on the market. And I also have books about positive affirmations because I want my autistic kids to know they are enough, they are loved, they are important. And just because they have autism doesn't mean they're not enough. And I know you said enough twice. It's because we don't talk about these things in the community. I know for my family, this is their first special needs family member, and this is their first time being openly exposed because I openly talk about autism, and those are the things I do for the autism community. And I have a book coming out that I won't talk about so much, but you guys, when it comes out, it's going to be very controversial. Very, I promise.
I'm excited, but I want to talk about the books that you've made right now that are on the market, available on Amazon. We are very much underrepresented in this community, which is interesting enough because there's so much data out there that talks about how Black children and brown children in our communities are under-identified and underserved, or over-identified and underserved. So the fact that you are making it known that there are children that look like us and adults that look like us who are autistic is very powerful.
Thank you. You know what? That's the point of me being an author, is because of that. Because number one, I have nothing against seeing another race, but it's more powerful for my son to see a book and know it's about him. Or it can be another person and they're gonna be like, oh my God, I have got a video. So I said, this book look like my son. And this is the reason why I picked it up. And I learned about autism. And it's also taking time to educate people. Just because you're autistic doesn't mean they're different. We're all different.
Correct.
People, I hear the word normal used a lot, but are we really normal? Yeah. Is that really a thing? We all think differently. We all see things differently. And I look at autistic people, they have superpowers that are hidden and we probably just don't understand. Tesla will never be here. Tesla, the owner of Tesla, is autistic.
Right.
So I just want us to nurture that and talk about autism, especially in the Black community, because we need more resources in our community. You know how far I have to drive for resources?
Yes.
In a city of Atlanta, and Atlanta is really a Black city. But for it to be a Black city, I have to drive outside of Atlanta to get any good resources for my child.
we're going to jump right into these conversations. You are touching on everything we're going to talk about. So tell me a little bit about when your son was first diagnosed and when you were first invited to the IEP table.
Okay, so my son was diagnosed when he was 2. It was 2019, right before COVID. It was October 2019. When he was diagnosed, I gave myself 2 days to be in my feelings. I'll never forget, I took him to this carnival that same day, and I was trying to wrap my head around, I finally have it in black and white. He's autistic. And then that happened, and I started to find his resources. I did Babies Can't Wait in Georgia. He was already about to turn 3, so the lady was amazing. The only reason he was at the Babies Can't Wait program was to get him the IEP. That's the reason I mentioned it. So we did that in February, but COVID happened. So APS dropped the ball. I didn't hear from APS for months. I had to call them and say, hey, I did this in February. I haven't heard anything. My son's supposed to be in school. What's going on? So I started to advocate for him. That's when I started to really advocate. So he got in school at like October 2020. It was virtual, of course. He didn't have an IEP yet, but he was in a special needs class. No, I don't lie. He did have an IEP. And me and the ABA therapist, we went over it together. And I didn't understand it. I wasn't intimidated because I had a BCBA and I had my RBT right there. There's right there helping me, assisting me through the whole process. So I wasn't as intimidated. That was my first time with the IEP.
So it's been about 1.5 years since your son has been in public school. Yes. How's the experience been?
Girl. Okay, so his first teacher he had was amazing. I admitted the IEP because I didn't like the speech, and I had no problems. She knew what she was doing. She'd been in education for years, for I think 20-some plus years. Amazing. This year I had a first year teacher, so that was kind of interesting. I think personally she didn't like me because I knew my rights. Like she tried to give me, so my son IEP was coming up, and I was like, it's this day, but I don't have a draft. She said, well, I can send it to you over the weekend. I said, no, ma'am. His IEP is on Monday. I'm not about to read, I said, how many pages is it? 30 pages over the weekend and prepare properly to no, I have so many books. Google, it became my best friend. First, you got the IED. So when I found that my son was autistic, I did my part by doing research. I did my part about learning what an IEP is, what does special education look like. So when I say what does special education look like, I started to Google things. I started to ask questions. When I meet parents who have special needs kids, I asked them questions. I wasn't intimidated to ask questions. I asked my therapist when he had a therapist team, hey, what questions should I ask? What services should I request? What should the school, because IEP, what people don't realize, is a legal binding contract between you and the school district. You can sue the school if they don't do what they're supposed to do for your child. An IEP is for your child. Every IEP is supposed to be different. Like, that's why this year IEP, like my son's current IEP, when he go to school in August, his new teacher, bless her soul or his soul, because I'm that first week, I'm going to admit it.
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is that you first empowered yourself and you dove right in because you understood that you were your child's first line of defense in education. Awesome job. Kudos to you, Mom. I could just shout. So great job. Awesome.
Thank you. I wish that more parents knew that in order for your kids to succeed, you're the number one advocate. If you're not advocating for your kid, you think that teacher is really going to the IEP? No. And I'm sorry to say it. They're underpaid.
So let me ask you this. It sounds like you did a lot of research on your own. How much can you say that the school prepared you for your IEP meeting? Like, did they offer you resources?
Dominique, why are you playing?
I got to ask the questions because the parents want to know.
Now, you know. it really depends on the leadership of that school.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that. I'm not going to say schools don't do that, but I have not had that ever, because I came in not being a know-it-all, but I came in with my research. I came in with my therapist. I came in with guns blazing, and I understand what I want. Like, but this year IEP meeting went a lot different because I don't have a therapist team. I went in with a personal statement. I mean, a vision statement of what I want my son school year to look like. It's every year, so I made sure I broke it down. And honestly, I ran my son IEP meeting this year. The teacher, her goals were too generalized. I can tell that it wasn't for my child. So I ran the meeting.
Absolutely. This is some good information, Crystal, and I'm telling you, it very much aligns with what we are talking about today. So thank you so much for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
So what led you to prepare so much before going into the public education system? Had you heard things, or just what? Because this isn't anything that is normal, I feel like, or the parents that come to me are not as equipped as you are. So what led you to say, I need to do my research, I need to figure this out, I know these people not going to give me the information that I need? So what caused you to do that?
So people look at this like I'm crazy. Number one, my auntie, she was a special needs teacher. So my son wasn't talking by one. My auntie kept saying to me, "You're your kid advocate," and she drilled it into my head. So when I got it in black and white, I knew I was his advocate, and that's really what it was. It wasn't nothing else. It was just like, okay, I'm your advocate. I'm an advocate for you. So my son has no worries because I'm going to be right there advocating for him to get the things that he needs and deserves. Like even when it comes to his accommodations, you're going to give him his accommodations because by law, you have to do that. And I hate using the word law, but I know, unfortunately, sometimes you have to push the envelope so they know you're not playing. Sometimes you have to show who you are just one good time, and then you can relax the rest of the school year.
Absolutely. So what is one thing that all parents need to know before attending their first IEP meeting?
One thing, that is a good question.
Just one thing, give me one good thing.
One good thing, bring pen and paper. Take notes.
Take notes. I love it.
Take notes. So you can go back and refer to your notes. So as I'm like talking, I have an IEP planner that I created. I'll have no notes in here, but let's say we talking or whatever, I'll be okay. You said parent said this, and I go back and refer it, and we discuss it. That's if you don't have a good memory, and just take notes. Oh, and create an IEP binder or folder. Make sure you get a copy of the IEP. I have been meeting so many parents who don't have a copy of their kids' IEP, and it blows my mind.
No.
I met a parent this weekend at a pop-up shop, and she wanted to buy my IEP planner, but I was sold out. And I was like, I never got a copy. And I was like, you never got it. Her kid is 11. I said, you never got a copy of your kid IEP from all the way to now? She said, no. I didn't know I was entitled to that. I was like, wow. So I wanted to drop that gem.
May I ask what race she was?
You already know. She was a Black queen. She didn't know about accommodations. She knew absolutely nothing. But her child is 11 years old in the system for him. Wow.
And it makes you wonder how many more parents are out there like that, unarmed and unprepared.
There's so many parents out there like that. I meet them all the time because people ask me all the time to be the IEP coach. I say, I'm not a coach. I will help you, but I'm not a coach. But it just blows my mind that they don't know the basic information, or they haven't took the time to educate themselves, and their kids are older than my kids and my kid. I'm like, wow, this is so heartbreaking to know that the school didn't even try to give you a copy.
Yeah. That's why
sad.
the information that you've shared today is so critical to any parent of a child with unique learning needs, because we have to really, really, I mean, just in life, they say that as Black people, we have to work 10 times as hard. I feel like we're working 20 times as hard because I'm working for myself and I'm working for my child. So we already know, because we are far behind the times. And if no one's giving us this information, we have to constantly seek it out.
Dominique, and that's the heartbreaking part, that if we don't take the time for ourselves to educate ourselves or come to a conference like this, we will be stuck in the dark.
Yeah.
It's so many resources that our allies know about that we know nothing about. Let me say it again. It's so many resources that our allies know about that we know nothing about. And why you think that is an issue? It's because we just don't know. And that's why on Zach,
we don't know what we don't know. And that is what,
right.
Yes.
And that's the reason why I wanted to drop this last gem. That's the reason why I created ZachariahWorld.com/the resources. Go to my resource tab. I'm constantly adding resources on there. And do y'all know we can get free pull-ups if your insurance will cover it? You know, you can get free. It's so much stuff that you can get that I'm pretty sure you didn't know about. It's grants for swimming. Like, my son just got a scholarship for swimming. Like, it's so much out there.
So much.
Yeah. And our allies
no one is giving it. We
That's
have
the part
to.
That the gatekeeping is what kills me.
Yeah. But you're right. That's why conferences like this is so important, so that these conversations can be had and this information can be shared. Crystal, this was absolutely wonderful. Before we go, can you please let the people know where can we find you if we want to connect with you? I just have questions. You have so many resources. I missed that website. Please give it to the people one more time.
Okay, so if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is I am Crystal Jordan. I am Crystal Jordan. Crystal spelled the normal way, Crystal, last name Jordan, Jordan. If you want to support my books, it's ZachariahWorld.com. It's ZACHARIA world.com. And you go on there, it's games for them, resources. Currently, people stay emailing me to add resources on there. So people are looking at my resources. So if you have resources, tell me, I will add it, because I created that part for us. Yeah. Let me say it again. I created that part for us because I knew nothing about resources. And when y'all see it, I am still adding. But like I said, you can find me on Instagram. I am Crystal Jordan, and you can support my books at ZachariahWorld.com. And I guess that's all. And if you want to watch any autism episodes, you can go back to Zachariah World to watch those, or you can go to the Bedroom Talk Show on YouTube or Amazon. So,
absolutely. Thank you so much again, Crystal. This has been phenomenal. The information that you shared today has been invaluable, and good luck to you. And please continue to do what you're doing for our autism community.
Most definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Dominique. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Wow. What great information. Hearing from our guests and their experiences firsthand really has me motivated. Every day, parents like you and like me are working to ensure our children receive the best in the public education setting. So let's get into it. For any parent working to step into the role of advocacy, it begins with the mindset. In this work of parent and student advocacy, you must always remain positive and assume good intent. I am a faithful follower of God. And through my journey of raising a Black child with autism, God has brought me to my knees many times, but he never left me there. And I am daily reminded of his word in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. God didn't declare that promise with a clause. He didn't say he only had plans for me at work or in my relationships. He said he has plans for me to prosper, plans to give me a future. This means that every time I open my mouth to advocate for my child and the child of parents that I serve, I am already giving God glory. I remember my very first meeting. Clifford had every day caused a disruption in his classroom, running out, defiance, hitting, throwing, not listening. The school had recently made the decision to change his classroom teacher, but a meeting was already scheduled to talk about what had been observed. I had the sense to know that I could not go to the meeting alone. I invited my father with me, but I didn't have the faith to know that no matter the outcome, God will remain in control. I did everything but curse in that meeting, and my son never returned to that campus. I had resolved nothing. 4 years later, I am attending meetings and I am looking past the people at the table, and I am staying fixed and focused on God and His Word. It's not about the people in the room. Because God already promised that He had plans for me, I know that He will remove any naysayer right up out their seat so that His will be done. Yes, you are going to take a stand for your child in the name of equity and inclusiveness, but you're going to take a stand in which your actions are backed by God. What was it that First Lady Michelle Obama said? When they go low, we go high. And tell me, what's higher than heaven? You have to remain positive and assume good intent. So now that you have your mind and your heart right, now you can prepare. You're not just going to show up for the meeting. No, you're going to show up prepared. And Crystal spoke very well about this, as well as Ms. Damara. For 6 years, I served in an urban community of 100% low-income families. I look back now, and I am even more encouraged because everything is intentional. My 3rd year, I was assigned to the role of special education general ed teacher, serving all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade special education students. This was my first year in this role, so there was a lot to learn and understand about students and both their academic and behavioral needs. But what I remember most were the IEP meetings. Parents always showed up clueless as to what services their child was to receive and the impact, if any, the services would have on the child in the classroom. They would agree to things they questioned in private later and left the IEP meetings unknowingly nowhere closer to supporting their child than before they came in. And on the side of the campus, it was a compliance police. So-and-so's art is due. We got to have it. If I have any educators in the room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But that's the past. After today, I am confident that children will begin to see impactful and lasting change due to the work that you're doing to prepare for your seat at the IEP table. So what does showing up prepared look like? It looks like coming to the meeting with your questions and concerns. This is your child, your student. What do you want to see changed? Ask the questions, mom and dad. Ask the questions. Teacher, step up and ask the questions. It is a collaborative space. Do not feel rushed. This is your time to understand what will take place for 8 hours of your child's day for 32 weeks out of the year. It is worth the time to talk about it. Are the grades dropping? Do you notice change in weight? Are they staying in their room more? Bring all the questions and concerns to the table so it can be addressed. Then you want to be clear on your academic and behavioral goals. Yes, you. My son continues to have goals set around organization. We started with organizing his backpack, then we progressed to a binder. Now we are working on writing assignments in a daily work journal. Why? Because my Black child needs to be able to keep up in the world around him and be a self-manager of his own time in academics. Academically, we are working on increasing work time with less breaks. But these are not goals the school gave me. Listen, 99.9% of the time, the goals are copied and pasted into the document. Whew! I didn't let some secrets out, but I'm serious. Your child is not a copy and paste. Your child is their own person. What will they need to reach their highest potential? Lastly, you want to always ask for additional supports and resources. As a parent raising a neurodiverse child, I can never have enough resources. Always ask. So what resources can you provide me with to help my child sleep? Yes, these are questions that can and should be asked to the professionals around the table. And if they don't have the answer, then and there, well, I won't get ahead of myself. But you don't ever be prideful. Ask for all the things. Lastly, you want to make sure that you follow up and follow through. The moms that we heard from today did this very well. During the meeting, you're going to take your own notes. You are in a great mood, remaining positive. You've shared your anticipated goals. Now you're taking notes on how this team is sharing they are going to reach the goal. Oh, this is getting good, and I'm excited. At the conclusion of the meeting, you are going to take your notes and you are going to send an email. Okay? Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. Today was great. I wanted to follow up with you with what was discussed today regarding Clifford to make sure everyone is on the same page moving forward. It is so important that you communicate in email because you want to get it in writing to make sure that your understanding of what took place in the meeting is clear. You're going to detail what was discussed during the meeting. And you're doing this for two reasons. Like I said, it puts things in writing, so it holds people accountable to the things you heard them say they were going to do. And two, it ensures that everyone has the same understanding about what your child needs to reach their fullest potential. Then you want to close out the communication by including next steps so that all teachers and staff are clear on how to work the plan. This is critical because everyone else that has interaction with your child needs to know and understand best practices for success. My son's annual art and IEP meetings used to last for hours. There would be so many people there. Everyone had their own goal for him, promising time they were going to spend with him that never came. This year in January, the only people that I allowed, yes, that I allowed at our meeting were the principal and his teachers. That's it. He had one goal surrounding his behavior. We all sat down and took notes, and I did majority of the talking. I had to empower myself. It's not that he didn't have other needs. It's just that we only needed to focus on one goal before we could address anything else. Listen, there is no more powerful advocate than a parent armed with information and options. Stop second guessing yourself. Stop acting as if you are waiting on other people to make decisions for your child. You are enough. Say it with me. I am enough. Notice how I never mentioned take this class or get this training or read this book. Yes, read your materials, but more importantly, prepare. Our parents today were prepared. They did their own research and they asked their own questions. They knew what they wanted for their child. They didn't put the success of their child in someone else's hands. Be prepared. All right, so let's summarize it. What are the moves? First thing, we're going to remain positive and assume good intent from all those involved in educating your child. Then we said that we are going to communicate goals and expectations. You are the most credible voice at the IEP table. Show up like you know it. Lastly, we're going to hold ourselves and others accountable because we must always inspect what we expect. Well, friends, that is our time together today. And I want to thank you so much for joining me here. If you have any questions or are in need of an advocate, or if you need parent coaching to help you stay motivated through your journey, my contact information is listed here. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck.